A mistake of just 50 kilometers ended up costing one of the two countries a lot. The arrival of Indian Rafale jets was the big moment Narendra Modi had been waiting for over 6 years. If there's one clear example of electronic warfare, radar, and cyber warfare in recent history, the Pakistan-India one-hour war in May, India's strike was an aggressive show of strength. Indian fighter jets had locked down the entire eastern border of Pakistan, from the Indian Ocean all the way up to Kashmir. On the night between May 6 and 7, 2025, a historic battle went down between India and Pakistan that changed the whole nature of their conventional warfare. Three things about this war were totally new. First, it was the first time the professional air forces of two nuclear powers faced off with real intent to kill. Before this, in the past 40 years, only strong air forces attacked much weaker enemies. Like when Russian, Israeli, and American jets bombed Syria, Yemen, and Gaza, these countries couldn't defend themselves. The last real fight between professional armies was in 1982 between the British and Argentine air forces, known as the Falklands War. After that, there were some aircraft skirmishes during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s. Both were old-school dogfights with fewer than 40 planes on each side. But in this year, long war between Pakistan and India, over 100 aircraft were involved. In this battle, for the first time ever, radar, the electronic and cyber warfare skills of two professional armies were put to the test. Another new thing about this war was that it wasn't a typical dogfight. Instead, it was fought with missiles fired from way beyond what the pilots could see. In a usual dogfight, pilots face off, lock onto each other, and then shoot with guns or missiles. But in this battle, the planes never came face to face. They engaged from hundreds of kilometers away using complex electronic warfare. They had to lock onto and strike the beyond visual range fighter jets. India called this Operation Sindoor. According to him, the goal was to retaliate against the Pahalgam terrorist attack on April 22 by targeting the supposed bases in Pakistan where the attack was planned. But the truth is, India couldn't provide any proof to any country in the world linking the Pahalgam tragedy to Pakistan. In fact, he couldn't convince a single country anywhere. It looked like Pakistan was behind these attacks. Pahalgam seemed like a false flag operation, and intelligence agencies from all the major countries had already briefed their governments about it. Or maybe they just weren't convinced that Pakistan was involved. So from the start, this wasn't just a war or a justified war, nor was it defensive or retaliatory. Pakistan hadn't actually attacked India. So from both a philosophical and military standpoint, it was purely a war of aggression, a show of power, not a war that was necessary. Prime Minister Modi had been waiting 6 years to get French Ray fighter jets to take on Pakistan. The loss in the short 2019 conflict, the downing of one of his MiG planes, and the pilot's capture was still fresh in India's mind. So, Operation Sindoor was really about restoring honor and settling the score. That's why the Indian Air Force activated all its bases for this war, stretching from the Arabian Sea in the south all the way up to occupied Kashmir in the north. So, The entire eastern border of Pakistan was covered. This included air bases like Srinagar, Awantipora, Ambala, Bathinda, Suratka, Bikaner, Jodhpur, Utalai, Buji, and Nalia. The Sindoor operation was said to be led by French Rafales flying out of Bathinda. Along with them, Mirage 2000, Sukhoi 30, and MiG-29 jets were also heavily involved in the mission. A few Jaguar and Tejas planes took part too, but mainly in support roles. AWACS aircraft were up in the air as well, guiding the jets throughout. The Indian planes were backed up by the Russian-made S-400 air defense system. One unit was set up at Adampur in Punjab and another at Bothosh Air Base in Gujarat. These systems, with a defense range of 400 kilometers, could spot and shoot down aircraft deep inside Pakistan's airspace. Between the 6th and 7th of May, just after midnight, the Indian planes were ordered to strike Pakistan. A total of 72 fighter jets took off from 10 different Indian air bases. Once in the air, these planes flew in various formations. The Rafale jets, nicknamed Godzilla by the Indian Air Force, were flying in formation all the way from Rajasthan to occupied Kashmir. Interestingly, as the Indian planes took off, the nerve centers of the Pakistan Air Force were watching the Indian formations on their operations room screens. Radars and digital systems along the India-Pakistan border were sending real-time updates of the whole situation because Pakistan was on high alert following the Pahalgam attack on April 22. Indian leaders began making threats. Pakistani planes were flying day and night patrols, keeping watch and ready to strike. Pakistan's early warning AWACS planes were tracking enemy jets in the sky. With everything on high alert, Pakistani pilots were kept ready near the runway, waiting to respond quickly. For the initial response, 5 forward air bases, Bolari, Shahbaz, Rafiki, Mushaf, Minhas, and Peshawar were all on standby. Dozens of planes were ready to go at other air bases as backup. On the night of May 6 to 7, as soon as the Air Force HQ found out the enemy was about to launch a big operation, the Pakistan Air Force got the order to fly. Pakistan's counterattack against the Indian planes started within just 2 minutes. In the next few minutes, at least 42 Pakistani planes were in the air. Chinese made J-10C jets led the pack among the Pakistani aircraft. They were flown by the Pakistan Air Force's number 15 squadron, the Cobras. These jets took off from PF Air Base Minhas in Camera. There were at least 20 J-10C fighters at the base. 18 were sent out to engage the enemy, and 2 stayed back as backup. Another 24 aircraft, including JF-17 Block 3s and Mirages, were supporting the J-10Cs. A few F-16s probably joined the fight too. But right at the front lines, it was just the J-10Cs. Pakistani planes had support from Aero Oasis early warning aircraft and ground air defenses. By around 1 a.m., planes from both Pakistan and India were face-to-face across the border. With AWACS and other support planes involved, each side had between 115 and 125 jets. No pilot could actually see the enemy's planes. They just saw a few dots on their screens showing where the enemy was flying. Their job was to track and attack those dots. It was basically like playing a video game. This was a totally new kind of war, unlike anything seen before. In this conflict, Indian pilots were strictly told not to cross into Pakistani airspace, no matter what. There were two reasons for this. First, back in 2019, Pakistan shot down an Indian pilot, Abhinandan's MiG-21. The Pakistan Air Force played smart. They jammed the plane's communications, forcing it into Pakistani airspace. Once it crossed over, it was easier to track and shoot down. Pakistan then captured the wreckage and arrested the pilot. Videos of the downplane and Abhinandan caused a lot of embarrassment for the Indian government and Air Force. So, to avoid any future embarrassment, this time there were strict orders that no matter what, Indian planes wouldn't cross into Pakistani airspace. Interestingly, according to India, Abhinandan, who's hailed as a war hero for supposedly shooting down Pakistan's F-15, which is totally false, was supposed to be part of Operation Sindoor. But the truth is, he wasn't even allowed near it. Maybe India didn't want to risk lowering their pilots' morale, so they played it safe. So the second reason the Indian jets stayed in their own airspace was because the Pakistan Air Force had the PL-15 missile. The Indian Air Force thought these missiles had a range of only 145 km. That's why Indian planes kept at least 150 km inside their border to stay out of reach. But surprisingly, Indian intelligence was wrong. The PL-15's range wasn't 145 km. It was actually 200 km. It was a huge strategic mistake that cost India's leaders both militarily and politically. Guys, the long-range French missiles on Indian jets were meteors with a max range of about 150 km. Everyone knew this, including the Pakistan Air Force. Since Pakistan could track the exact positions of Indian jets from their command centers, they kept their aircraft about that distance away in their own airspace. This gave the PAF a sneaky strategic edge of about 50 kilometers. Pakistan could have taken full advantage of this. But the Pakistani forces were told not to respond until India made the first move. So India would be seen as the aggressor. At 1:05 a.m., Indian forces launched their attack. Indian planes and troops stationed along the line of control also opened fire on Pakistan. They were firing Excalibur shells from M777 ultralight howitzer cannons. These GPS-guided missiles had a range of 35 to 40 km. India's air and ground strikes hit at least 9 spots in Pakistan and Azad Kashmir. They targeted mosques, madrasas, and homes around Bahawalpur, Murik, Sokot, Shakagar, Kotli, and Muzaffarabad. At least 31 civilians, including innocent women and children, were killed in these attacks. Several mosques and the family quarters attached to them were destroyed. When the Indian army launched an aggressive attack on Pakistan's sovereign land, Pakistan now has a legal right to retaliate under international law. Pakistan already knew the locations of the Indian jets in the command and control centers. So now every aircraft became fair game. The era of beyond visual range missile combat had officially started. Here's the deal. The first step to taking down any plane in modern warfare is locking onto it. Once a plane gets locked, it tries to shake off the lock by doing evasive maneuvers. Sharp, quick turns up and down. It's kind of like wrestling. When a wrestler is caught in a hold, they struggle with their hands and feet to break free. Sometimes they make it, sometimes they don't. In modern dogfights, locking on and breaking lock happens constantly, with pilots only having a few seconds to react. Right from the start, Pakistan had a bunch of technical advantages over the Indian planes. One big edge was that the Indian Air Force had the wrong info about Pakistani missile ranges, which turned out to be a deadly mistake. They unknowingly flew right into missile range. Another advantage was that Pakistan was way better at electronic warfare than India. In their war rooms, the Pakistan Air Force commanders were keeping an eye on the Indian aircraft's radio chatter and signals, along with radar communications. On top of that, the PAF could jam the Indian Air Force's communications. Basically, Pakistan had the upper hand over India in both cyber and electronic warfare. So, with these two major advantages, Pakistan intercepted Indian planes. First, to throw off the enemy jets, they fired a missile without locking onto any target. When Indian warplanes form up, they use a tactic called a api-pai. Basically, it gives the enemy a chance to back off without a fight once they realize they're up against a stronger force. Pilots in the target jets can see missiles coming but can't tell which plane is actually being targeted because everyone assumes another plane is locked on, but it's not. The RAPI missile explodes when it reaches its range, causing confusion and panic in the enemy ranks. All the pilots talk to each other to find out what's going on, but the higher ups hack into these communications to learn a lot. Pakistan was the first to use this tactic against Indian planes. They fired a PL-15 missile near the Punjab border, right in the middle of a group of Indian jets. When the missile exploded between the planes, the Pakistan Air Force says at least one Indian jet got hit by the debris. But what kind of damage it caused isn't clear. What is certain is that no Indian aircraft was destroyed in the attack. After that, Pakistan quickly started locking onto Indian aircraft across the line of control. Meanwhile, Indian planes were trying to lock onto Pakistani jets, but kept failing because of constant electronic jamming. There was a clear gap between Pakistan and India's electronic warfare capabilities, with Pakistan having the upper hand. Throughout this 1-hour conflict, Pakistan kept disrupting Indian radars and communications, something India hadn't really expected. During the whole battle, the Indian planes couldn't lock onto or hit a single Pakistani fighter. Meanwhile, the Pakistani Air Force locked onto several Indian aircraft, and at a press conference on May 9, they even showed technical proof for 7 of them. The PF fired PL-15 missiles at 7 Indian jets from their J-1C planes, including the French-made Rafale, which is a top tier 4.5 generation fighter jet and one of the best in the world. It's got a radar system that can detect incoming attacks. But for this to happen, the incoming missiles radar had to be on. Pakistan fired PL-15 missiles, but their own radar was temporarily turned off. Instead, these missiles were being guided by AIM-ASIS aircraft. The Indian radar was jammed, so they couldn't get their planes through the information system either. Then, when the PL-15 missiles were about 30 km away from the targeted Indian aircraft, flying at around Mach 3, the radar systems were switched on. So, the Indian pilots flying Rafale jets and others could see on their radar screens that a missile was coming at them at Mach 3, which is 3 times the speed of sound. But since a missile at Mach 3 covers 30 kilometers in just about 30 seconds, the pilots had almost no time to react. Their only choice was to pull over and eject from their seats. Basically, save their lives by using the automatic parachute system or make a desperate last effort to save the plane in those final 30 seconds. Your own life could be on the line here. The Indian Air Force is brave and professional, so we don't know exactly how many pilots ejected or tried to make the maneuver. But we do know how many Indian pilots died in that 1 hour battle because the Indian officials never revealed their losses. However, the PAF claims they have electronic proof that at least 6 Indian planes were shot down. They say a 7th plane was hit too, but ground intelligence couldn't confirm if it was destroyed. So the Pakistan Air Force isn't claiming they shot down the 7th Indian plane. The 6 planes they say they downed include 3 Rafales, 1 Mirage 2000, 1 Sukhoi 30, and 1 MiG-29. At least 4 of these crashed in occupied Kashmir, and 1 went down in Bathinda, Indian Punjab. That's close to the base where the Rafale jets from the Godzilla squadron took off. The Pakistan Air Force gave solid proof of shooting down the Rafale during a press conference. The PAF shared a recording of a conversation between ground radar and the wingman of the 4th Rafale in the Godzilla formation. The wingman said he couldn't reach his 3rd aircraft and had also seen an explosion in the air. The dogfight between the 2 air forces went on for over an hour. Meanwhile, the Indian jets didn't manage to fire a single missile at the Pakistani planes. Their radars and communications kept getting jammed. In the end, India lost at least 6 aircraft. The Pakistan Air Force started pulling back little by little as part of a plan. Basically, they let the enemy planes move out of range. This is actually the smartest move to keep control of the situation and give the other side a way out. All experienced militaries use this tactic to stop a conflict from getting out of hand and turning into a battle of pride. Each side gives the other an escape route to avoid a never-ending war. So, the Pakistan Air Force stopped locking onto Indian planes and interfering with their communications. The Indian Air Force used this safe route to start landing their planes at the bases. Pakistani Air Force jets also headed back to their bases. Meanwhile, Pakistan's air dominance was clear. India lost 6 planes and had to retreat, while none of Pakistan's planes were damaged. In the hour-long battle, Pakistan had full control of the skies. Indian jets didn't even get close to hitting Pakistani planes, let alone fire a missile. This fight was a big loss, not just for India, but also for the French company that makes the Rafale jets. Since the Rafale had never scored a kill before, that was its biggest selling point, and it was flying off the shelves. But now, at least 3 Rafales were confirmed shot down in just 1 hour. India tried hard to cover up this huge embarrassment, but for 2 reasons. They couldn't hide the loss of their planes. First, because on May 11, Pakistan Air Force Vice Marshal Aurangzeb held another detailed press conference called in international media and showed electronic evidence proving how Pakistan shot down the Indian jets in retaliation. It also showed clear signs that the Indian Air Force's communication systems were totally jammed and hacked. The Indian Air Force held a detailed press conference on the same day, May 11. But they didn't really say anything clear. Their electronic signals didn't confirm if they had hit any Pakistani planes or not. The IAF neither confirmed nor denied losing any aircraft. In fact, the Indian officials at the press conference looked pretty downbeat. It sent a clear message to the whole world that even with the advanced Rafale jets, Narendra Modi didn't achieve his goals. The second proof of the Indian planes being shot down was that the next day, wreckage from the destroyed planes was found in occupied Kashmir and Indian areas. For instance, one video showed a crashed plane near Aknor with smoke coming from the wreckage. Another video was from Pulwama, where you could see pieces of a plane. The Indian newspaper, the Hindustan Times, also reported the plane crash in Bathinda. This news was still on their website when this video was uploaded. Besides that, India's mainstream paper, The Hindu, tweeted that 3 planes were destroyed in Kashmir. But they had to delete the tweet later because of pressure from the Indian right wing. There was any doubt left about the Indian jets being destroyed, the statement from India's chief of defense staff, Anil Chauhan, cleared it up in an interview with the American channel Bloomberg. He admitted that the planes were destroyed. From what he said, it was obvious that India had lost more than one aircraft. Not just the media, but other international sources have confirmed this too. A French intelligence official told CNN that at least one Rafale jet was shot down. Then US officials also reported that 2 Indian aircraft were downed, including at least one Rafale. Friends, the fight didn't stop with the Indian jets being destroyed on the night of May 6-7. That's because Pakistan had now fought back, the response to India violating. Pakistan's sovereignty hadn't come yet. But before Pakistan could react, the Indian Air Force, trying to hide the loss of its jets and save face, made a desperate move to target Pakistani assets, to spin the failed Operation Sindoor as a win to the Indian public. They launched drone and missile attacks on Pakistan starting May 8. The war was now entering a new stage, with Indian leaders desperate to cause some damage to Pakistan, which could prove its win to the public. The BJP could show people that their actions worked. Pakistan had to defend itself here too. But how well did Pakistan actually do? How did Pakistan's Operation Banyan Al Masu's respond to Operation Sindoor? Was the ceasefire brokered by Donald Trump or decided directly by the 2 DGMOs? Friends, we'll talk about this in the next video, which will be the final one in this series. Meanwhile, if you want to check out the details of previous wars between Pakistan and India, like the ones in 1965 and 1971,